The classroom smelled of chalk dust and old books, a scent that settled into my skin like a memory I couldn't shake. I sat at the back, my notebook open but untouched, my eyes drawn to her. She stood at the front, her hands moving with quiet grace as she wrote on the blackboard, her voice a soft melody that wove through the room, pulling me in despite myself. Her name was Professor Elena Marquez, and she taught literature with a passion that made every word feel alive, like it could reach inside you and shift something fundamental. I was 19, a sophomore lost in the chaos of college, my life a tangle of expectations and uncertainties. She was a beacon, steady and untouchable, but I wanted to touch her, to know her, in a way that terrified me to my core. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. I'd grown up in a small town called Willow Creek, where love followed a script. A boy, a girl, a future mapped out in neat lines. My parents, Ellen and Tom, were kind but strict, their values carved into me like stone. I was the good daughter, the one who studied hard, who smiled at church picnics, who dated boys like Mark, a junior with a lopsided grin and a pickup truck that smelled of leather and pine. My older sister Claire had followed their path, marrying young to a man named David who fit their vision of perfect. I was expected to do the same, to be the girl who didn't question, who didn't stray. But in that classroom, watching Elena's dark hair catch the sunlight filtering through the window, I felt something stir, something I couldn't name. It wasn't just her beauty, though she was beautiful, with warm brown eyes and a smile that felt like a secret meant just for me. It was the way she spoke, the way she saw the world, the way she made me want to be more than the girl I'd been taught to be. The semester unfolded like a slow dance, each lecture pulling me closer to her. I'd linger after class, asking questions about poems I'd already dissected, just to hear her voice a little longer. She'd lean against her desk, her fingers brushing the edge of a book, and I'd notice the smallest things, the way her sleeves fell just above her wrists, revealing skin that looked soft as a whisper, the faint scar on her knuckle, the way her necklace rested against her collarbone. Once, when I handed her my essay, our fingers touched, and the jolt was like static, sharp and fleeting. She didn't seem to notice, but I carried that moment with me, replaying it in the quiet of my dorm room, my heart racing with a mix of fear and longing. I told myself it was nothing, just admiration, just a crush, but deep down I knew it was more, and that knowledge was a weight I carried alone. My life outside her classroom was a performance. I laughed with my roommate Sarah, a bubbly art major who filled our dorm with sketches and laughter. I went to parties with Mark, letting him hold my hand as we danced under string lights, his breath warm with beer. I called my parents every Sunday, their voices cheerful but probing, asking about my grades, my plans, whether Mark was the one. I smiled through it all, but I wasn't there. My thoughts were with her. Her laugh, the way her eyes crinkled when she was excited, the faint scent of lavender that followed her. I'd sit in the library, pretending to study, but my mind was elsewhere, painting pictures of her in the margins of my notes. I saw her in the slant of light through my window, in the pages of the books she loved, in the quiet moments when I was alone with my thoughts. I was falling, and I didn't know how to stop. By midterms, the feeling was a storm inside me. I'd watch her in class, my heart pounding as she read aloud, her voice wrapping around the words like a caress. I'd notice the way her hands moved when she was excited, the way her eyes seemed to find mine, just for a moment, before moving on. I told myself I was imagining it, that she was just being kind, just being a teacher, but there were moments that made me question everything. One evening during office hours, as rain tapped against the window, she leaned forward to point at a passage in my notebook. Her hand brushed mine, her fingers warm and deliberate, and I froze, my breath catching. Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a moment, the air was thick, charged with something neither of us named. She pulled back, her smile faltering, and I left, my heart a mess of want and guilt. I tried to pull away. I told myself it was wrong. She was my teacher, older by a decade, wiser, someone I could never have. I threw myself into my life outside her classroom, going on dates with Mark, studying with Sarah, telling myself I could outrun this feeling. But it was like trying to hold water in my hands. Everything slipped through, and all I could think of was her. I saw her outside class one day, standing under an oak tree, leaves falling around her like confetti. She was reading, her lips moving slightly, and I wanted to know what words held her so completely. I walked past, my heart pounding, and she looked up, her eyes meeting mine. She smiled, and it was like the world tilted, like I'd been seen for the first time. I mumbled something about the weather and hurried away, my cheeks burning, wondering if she could hear the truth in my silence. The days stretched on, each one heavier with the weight of what I felt. I'd see her in the hallways, her presence pulling at me like gravity. I'd pass her office, the door ajar, and catch glimpses of her head bent over papers, her fingers tapping a pen, her hair falling over one shoulder. I wanted to stop, to walk in, to tell her everything, but fear held me back. What would she think? What would it cost her? Cost me? I was a student, she was a professor, and the lines between us were drawn in stone. But those lines felt like they were blurring, softening with every glance, every moment we shared. One afternoon, as the campus bloomed with spring, I saw her in the courtyard, sitting on a bench with a book. The air was warm, carrying the scent of lilacs, and I stopped, my heart racing. She looked up, her eyes soft, and gestured for me to sit. I did, my hands trembling, and we talked. About books, about life, about nothing and everything. Her knee brushed mine, and I felt it like a spark, a connection I couldn't ignore. When she laughed, her hand rested on my arm, her touch lingering, and I wanted to lean into her, to close the distance between us. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments. I'd stay late after class, our conversations stretching into the evening, the campus quiet around us. She'd tell me about the poets she loved, her voice soft and earnest, and I'd listen, hanging on every word, memorizing the curve of her lips. Once, as we walked across the quad, our hands brushed, and I felt the world narrow to just that touch, her warmth seeping into me. I wanted to hold her hand, to feel her fingers laced with mine, but I didn't dare. The risk was too great, the consequences too heavy. Yet every moment with her felt like a step towards something inevitable, something I both craved and feared. The turning point came at the end of the semester, at a department reading event. She was there, reading poetry under soft lights, her voice weaving through the room like a spell. I sat in the back, my hands clasped tight, feeling every word like a touch. The room was full, but it felt like it was just us, her voice reaching across the space to find me. Her words spoke of love, of longing, of forbidden things, and I wondered if she knew, if she felt it too. Afterward, I found her in the hallway, her coat draped over her arm, her eyes tired but warm. I don't know what made me bold. Maybe the wine, maybe the poetry, maybe the ache I'd carried too long. I asked if she wanted to walk to her car, and she nodded, her smile soft. The night was cold, the air sharp with the promise of snow, and as we walked, our shoulders brushed, sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. At her car, she turned to me, her breath visible in the air, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stepped closer, my heart pounding, and kissed her. It was hesitant, soft, my lips barely brushing hers, but it was like the world cracked open. Her hand found my cheek, her touch warm and steady, and she kissed me back, slow and deep, like she'd been waiting too. The kiss was a confession, a question, a promise, and when we pulled apart, her eyes were wide, searching mine. She whispered something, and it was the first time I felt truly seen. We stood there, the world quiet except for the sound of our breaths, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. After that, we were careful, but not careful enough. We'd meet in secret, coffee shops far from campus, her apartment with the curtains drawn, stolen moments in empty classrooms. Each touch was a risk, each glance a secret we shared. I'd hold her hand under the table, her fingers laced with mine, and feel like I was stealing something precious. She'd brush my hair back, her touch lingering, and I'd memorize the feel of her, the warmth of her skin, the way her breath caught when I leaned into her. We talked about everything: her past, her dreams, the books she loved, the fears she hid. She told me about growing up in a family that didn't understand her, about the years she spent hiding who she was, about the lover she'd lost to fear and distance. I told her about my town, my parents, the sister who'd followed their rules, the life I was supposed to want. In those moments, I felt known, loved in a way I'd never thought possible. Our second kiss came weeks later, in her apartment, the air thick with the scent of coffee and rain. We'd been sitting on her couch, our knees touching, the tension building until it was unbearable. I leaned into her, my heart racing, and kissed her. Deeper this time, more certain. Her hands found my waist, pulling me close, and the kiss was a fire, burning away the doubts I'd carried. Her lips were soft, tasting faintly of mint, and every touch was a revelation. We pulled apart, breathless, her forehead resting against mine, and I felt her heartbeat, steady and real, against my own. We sat there, her hand in mine, and I wanted to stay forever, to build a world where it was just us. But the world wasn't kind to us. Rumors started, whispers among students, glances from colleagues like Professor Harris, a stern man who seemed to watch Elena too closely. Sarah, my roommate, noticed my late nights, my distracted smiles, and asked questions, her eyes sharp with suspicion. I lied, said I was studying, but the lies tasted bitter. My parents called, their voices cheerful but probing, asking why I seemed distant, why I hadn't mentioned Mark in weeks. I wanted to tell them, to scream the truth, but I was afraid of their judgment, of losing them, of losing her. Elena felt it too, the weight of what we were doing. She'd hold me close, her head resting on my shoulder, and I'd feel her tremble, her fear as real as mine. We were breaking rules, crossing lines, and the cost was always there, lurking in the shadows. One evening, months later, we couldn't hold back anymore. We were at her apartment, the air heavy with the scent of rain and the candles she'd lit. We'd been talking, our voices soft, our hands brushing as we sat on her couch. The tension had been building for weeks, a slow burn that left me breathless. I leaned into her, my heart racing, and kissed her, hungry and desperate, my hands tangling in her hair. Her hands were on me, pulling me close, and we moved together, a tangle of limbs and longing. The world fell away, leaving only the warmth of her skin, the softness of her breath, the way her touch made me feel whole. We fell asleep together, her arms around me, her heartbeat a steady rhythm against my back. I felt safe, cherished, like I'd found the place I was meant to be. In the morning, we lay there, whispering about our fears, our hopes, the life we wanted but couldn't have. She told me she was scared of losing her job, her reputation, everything she'd built. I told her I was scared of losing her, of facing a world that wouldn't understand. We held each other, the sunlight filtering through the curtains, and I knew I'd fight for this, for her, no matter the cost. Her hand rested on my cheek, her thumb tracing slow circles, and I leaned into her touch, memorizing the feel of her, the quiet between her words. We kissed again, soft and lingering, her lips a promise I wanted to keep forever. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance. We stole moments where we could, her hand brushing mine as we passed in the hallway, her smile catching me across a crowded room. One night, at a quiet cafe, we sat in a corner booth, our knees touching under the table. I reached for her hand, my fingers trembling, and she squeezed back, her warmth grounding me. We talked about the future, about a world where we didn't have to hide, and when we kissed goodbye in the shadows of the parking lot, it was fierce and certain, her lips claiming mine with a passion that left me dizzy. But the world kept pressing in. Sarah's questions grew sharper, her eyes narrowing when I came home late. My parents sensed the change, their voices tinged with worry, asking if I was okay, if I was still their girl. I wasn't, not anymore, but I couldn't tell them why. The cost came sooner than I expected. A week after that night in the cafe, a colleague confronted Elena, their voice low but sharp, accusing her of favoritism, of crossing lines. The rumors had grown, fed by careless moments, a touch too long, a glance too obvious. She didn't deny it, but she didn't confess either. She came to me that night, her eyes red, her voice steady but broken. She said we had to stop, that it was too dangerous, that she couldn't risk everything. I begged her to stay, my voice cracking, but she kissed me, soft and sad, her lips lingering on mine as if to memorize me. She asked me to let her go, and I did, because I loved her, but it felt like tearing out my heart.
The months that followed were a blur of pain. I saw her in class, her voice still a melody, but her eyes avoided mine. I dated Mark again, trying to fill the void, but his touch felt wrong, like a language I didn't speak. Sarah noticed my silence, her questions gentle but persistent, but I couldn't tell her. My parents called, their voices sharper now, asking why I seemed so distant, why I hadn't come home for spring break. I carried her with me in the books she loved, in the scent of lavender that lingered in my dreams. I doubted everything myself, the love we'd shared. Had it been real, or had I built it up in my mind? The question haunted me, a hook that kept me awake at night, my heart aching for the warmth of her touch, the sound of her voice. A year later, I saw her at a bookstore, her hair shorter, her smile softer, but still hers. I was 21 now, no longer her student, no longer bound by the rules that had kept us apart. My name is Emily, and I'd spent a year trying to forget her, but standing there, my heart knew the truth. I walked over, my hands trembling, and when she saw me, her eyes lit up, like she'd been waiting too. We talked, the words careful at first, then spilling out like a flood. She'd left the university, taken a job at a smaller college, started over. She'd missed me, she said, her voice breaking, and I felt the walls I'd built crumble. We started again, slowly, carefully. Coffee turned to dinners to nights spent tangled in each other, whispering secrets in the dark. Each kiss was a promise, each touch a vow. One night, as we lay together, her head on my shoulder, I kissed her softly, my lips tracing the curve of her jaw, and she sighed, her breath warm against my skin. We talked about the future, a house, a garden, a life where we didn't have to hide. Another time, in her new apartment, the air thick with the scent of rain, we kissed again, passionate and sure, her hands pulling me close as if she'd never let go. We fell asleep together, her arm draped over me, and I felt her heartbeat, steady and real, against my back. We whispered about our dreams, our fears, the life we wanted to build. My parents didn't understand, their voices cold when I told them, but I didn't care. I'd found her, my Elena, and she was worth everything. Now, sitting here, telling you this, I can still feel her, the warmth of her hand in mine, the softness of her breath, the way her love made me brave. We couldn't hide forever, and we didn't. We built a life, messy and imperfect, but ours. Every night, when I fall asleep beside her, her arm draped over me, I know I'd choose her again, no matter the cost. Her touch, her voice, her love, they're my home, and I'm finally free to live in it.